So namaste, welcome to Satsang. So Satsang is not just a place that we gather in a group like this. It is also our life. It is something that is always ongoing as a part of our life. And perhaps the majority of our clear seeing, our deepening and our awakening is going to happen outside of this kind of formal gathering where we take what we've seen, where we take what's been revealed to us, what's new to us, and begin to apply it to the rest of our life. Because it is in that application, that living as what we've seen, that we begin to really experience constant and effortless peace, no matter what is happening to our mind, to our body, to our world, to our emotions. There's always going to be something else to see, a deepening that can happen as you wake up further, as you move about your life. There's always going to be an opportunity to apply what you're seeing more. And really, awakening is a seeing and a being at the same time. It is recognizing what's true for you and for all of us, and also being that. And that really is the place where I really want to focus on today, how to be that self, how to live as that which is everywhere, all the time, not missing from any particular moment anywhere. How do we actually do that in an extraordinarily practical way? And it never fails to surprise me and amaze me that when a subject comes up that I feel I should speak about in satsang like this, the very next thing that happens is some kind of question is sent in, or some emailed in for satsang, or somebody will ask me something that is the exact same thing. So I want to start here with a question. I have one question that's been emailed in, because it really does get right to the heart of what I want to really speak about today. So I'll read this question, and then the rest of this will be kind of the answer to this question, but also hopefully a very useful thing that you can take and apply as you move about your life. So I'll read this question. Question says, "Dearest Helen, it seems that every time I am rooted as the self, I get seemingly kicked down again by strong, deeply buried emotions, usually as a result of having to deal with a really difficult family member or an abusive person in authority. It is really hard to stay as a self when this happens, as a primitive survival instinct kicks in due to consistent threats to my survival throughout my childhood. And so I go into fight or flight mode, a strong reactiveness and enmeshment with the other person's unawareness. It feels like I just cannot rest as a self during these episodes, but rather have to wait for my nervous system to calm down and I feel safe again before I can do so, which usually takes weeks. This is a consistent pattern on my path, even though the periods in between these reactive episodes are getting longer and longer. Could you please speak a little about this seemingly throwing my true self out of the window for the sake of the survival safety of the person, and what feels like taking 1.1 steps forward and 1 step back on the path? P.S. It seems that the person I'm having a difficult time with at a given moment notices my peace and is resenting me for it. And so they will start behaving badly towards me and will just not stop until they have a strong reaction from me. However, having followed your work for some months now, I imagine that you would suggest that I question if this is really true and if it is not, in fact, I who is resisting my own peace. Happy New Year, and thank you so much for your amazing satsangs. Well, Happy New Year to you as well. So you're completely right there that I would suggest that this external thing, it is a external person, is a reflection of something that's going on inside you that is being reflected. This person seems to be pushing and pushing until you lose your peace. You throw out the true self, as you said in your own words. And that's really at the core of what I want to speak about today, because it's fundamental in living as the self, what you're speaking about here. So if we seem to lose our peace or lose our perspective of and as the true self in any particular moment, then that's indicative, it's reflecting that we still feel that the self or the person or the self and the ego are two different things. So if I still deeply believe inside that I can experience either my egoic sense of self, my old perspective, my limited way, or my new way of seeing myself, my more expansive, open, loving way of being, if I can firmly agree inside that it's one or the other of those, then I will have to keep experiencing as a reflection, losing my expansive view of the self as the self, living as that, going back into the old contracted way, and then going back into something opens up again, and I have this beautiful experience again, and then I'll be thrown back into, and I'll be very literally experiencing my belief that it's either or, self or ego, self or mind, self or person. And this is really the crux of what it means to identify as the self. The ego is divisive. It wants to divide into either or. It thinks in terms of one or the other. So it sees this smaller, contracted, limited version of ourselves. And it sees this more expansive, unlimited, abundant aspect of ourselves. And it says, which one is right? Which one is right? Which one is the one that I want to keep a hold of? And it says, not this one, I want this one. And it divides them into two as if they are separate, different. But from the perspective of the self is inclusive. The ego is exclusive. It wants to exclude something and get this other thing. It's pushing away this contracted form and it's reaching for this expansive one. So it has to keep yo-yoing back and forth between these experiences. And although in this question you've said that it's happening less and less often, but it probably is also getting more and more painful when it does occur, because less and less do you want to exclude anything. So how do we step out of that? How do we move forward? And it's literally to identify as the self, which you can start to do right now in this moment. That whenever I'm experiencing either or, swinging backwards and forwards, having two different ways of experiencing myself, then I have excluded one. If I'm experiencing that peaceful expansiveness that is my nature, then I will be trying to hold on to that and excluding the contracted form. If I'm experiencing limitation, lack, negative emotions, suffering, I'll be trying to get rid of that and get back to this other one, all from the idea that these are two. But the self doesn't say which one is it? The self doesn't say either or. The self says and also, and it looks for all the ways it can experience itself in any moment. So when some fight or flight mechanism kicks in, or when some negative emotion happens, or where someone pushes a button in our life, or when something is absent that we feel we need, and there's some sense of suffering, even if what we feel we need is peace, if it seems to be gone in that moment, we can step right there into being the self and ask, what other way is there for me to experience myself? Is it really either or can I experience myself both ways at the same time? Can I notice this fight or flight mechanism kicking in and strong surging emotions? And can I also ask, is there any other way to experience myself as well as this? What other way is there to also experience myself in this moment? What we normally do is we begin to push against that strong egoic reaction, believing that we have to get rid of that before we can get back to peace. We normally push against whatever's arising, strong emotion, and we're trying to get back to something. All of that is from the idea that they're separate, they're two different things. But what if this strong fight or flight mechanism is arising inside the greater space of our being? Is it really true that we have to lose our peace then? Or is it that we've just gone back into this either orness? In any moment when any strong egoic reaction arises, or in every moment when it arises, we can switch into being the self. We can say, this is one way I can experience myself. I can experience myself as this separate being that's having a strong response going on, either in my world, in my body, in my emotions, in my finances, in my relationships, whatever way it's showing up. Sometimes all of those at once. And also, is there some other way I can experience myself? So we're not pushing against that, trying to get rid of it. We're also not believing that this egoic reaction has to disappear before we can find peace again. We're looking for peace as well as this egoic response. It's this subtle shift in our attitude in those moments. But it is huge in terms of how we'll begin to experience ourselves. If we go through our life and our satsang believing that every time the mind speaks and an emotion moves, we lose our peace, then we're going to be yo-yoing backwards and forwards. And I absolutely did that for such a long time until it became so painful that it caused me to really question, why do I keep experiencing these two states, for want of a better word, these two extremes? And is there a more intelligent way to approach this? I began to recognize that the self is inclusive. It wants to include every way it can of experiencing itself. And I began to recognize that I was only suffering. I wasn't suffering because my mind or my emotions or some strong reaction inside the body was happening. I was suffering because I believed that was the only way I could experience in that moment. It was one way, but not the only way. So it's a simple but profound shift in attitude when we begin to ask, what else is there I can experience in this moment? What else is there about me that I can notice in this moment? That's an action of inclusion, that I want to include every single way I can experience myself. And I'm only going to suffer if I'm trying to choose one or the other. Because trying to choose one or the other, trying to reject this response that's happening, some old, triggered, conditioned stuff that comes up, as it does for all of us. If I'm trying to reject that and get back to what I had before, the previous moment before this was triggered. That I'm really stating in my energy and my attitude and my conviction that it must be one or the other. And yet the self is saying both, all, everywhere can experience myself. It's inclusive. Ego is exclusive. It wants to exclude one and get the other. It's a very simple way of shifting your attitude. And the rewards of doing it in any moment are huge. Imagine if you could go throughout your entire life experiencing peace that you could never lose, simply because you'd kind of trained yourself not to exclude anything in those strong moments. You know, when we're sitting in peace anyway, it's naturally inclusive, isn't it? You don't want to change or exclude anything when you're quiet and there's peace and there's a silence that's intense. It's only when some strong reaction comes up that the habitual way of dealing with that is to push against it, to try to get rid of it and get back to this other, seemingly other state of peace. What if it's more about stepping back, expanding, zooming out when that strong reaction happens, and allowing yourself to experience the fullness of all the ways you can appear and are appearing in this moment? When I began to really grasp this, it was fundamental because I was no longer fearing any strong emotion, any fight or flight, any old survival mechanism. It can be functioning, it can be running the same thoughts, but they'll have no power over you when you're not giving them power. We're saying in effect that these thoughts can make me lose my peace. But really, my idea that I can lose peace is what's making me experience disturbance. Or perhaps more clearly said, my idea that these thoughts are getting in the way of something, that it has to be one or the other in any moment, is what's causing my suffering and nothing else. That it's not really this egoic response. It's my old habit of trying to have one or the other. What if your new mantra became, and what else can I experience about myself whilst this is still happening? What other aspect of me can I allow to come forth whilst I'm still feeling this? What else can I experience about myself in this moment? But if you just did that one thing simply and consistently, you can do it right now. If you're feeling any doubt or any unworthiness or something, any idea, you know, it's all right now in satsang, but later on I'm going to really struggle with this. Okay, that's one perspective. That's one way of seeing yourself right now. And can you open up and ask, what else is there that I can experience about me right now? So for this questioner, this person is reflecting literally back to you that they're pushing your buttons until you seem to lose your peace because you feel you can lose your peace. Because it's one or the other. Can you see the either orness in our experience? And most people go through this stage in their awakening where they experience these wild swings of either or, like a pendulum swinging back and forwards. Sometimes real strong fear, anger, desperation, sadness, doubting yourself, real dark moments, and then swinging back into peace, joy. There's nothing wrong with anything. I can't believe I ever believed I wouldn't make it. Why do I experience that other state? You know, it doesn't seem real there. Contracted state of ego doesn't seem real in the expansiveness of the real nature. And then the expansiveness of the real self seems totally unreal and lost and gone when I'm experiencing this small, contracted, desperate not quite there yet, not quite good enough yet-ness of the ego, the usual state of consciousness. The self is inclusive and ego is exclusive. Doesn't make ego wrong. It just means that you're not going to experience constant unbroken peace when you're being exclusive. When you're being inclusive, you can experience constant unbroken peace and an ever-growing sense of love and joy, as well as fear, as well as self-doubt, as well as anger, as well as not enoughness, and all of that that's happening in our egoic state. So you can literally shift from ego to self in any moment. This is what it means to identify as the self. This is what it means to stay as the self. Are you including all the ways that you've seen that you can experience yourself in this moment? Or are you picking one? Or are you trying to get rid of something? The self cannot push against anything and wouldn't want to. It cannot get rid of anything. It's naturally inclusive, open, inviting, and it doesn't see ego as something to be gotten rid of. It doesn't see mind as something to move away from. It naturally opens and includes whatever's appearing inside it, this contracted ball of despair or whatever it is we're feeling, and includes it in the peace. And the bottom line is, if we're including, we'll feel peaceful. If we're excluding, we'll feel disturbed and divided, and we'll experience the opposites. Ego works in opposites. And even ego here decides the self is the opposite of the ego, and it really simply isn't. Ego is just some movement arising inside the self, inside the space of your being. Like thoughts move in the awareness, or sounds happen inside the silence. You could say the ego says sound or silence, thought or awareness, movement or stillness. And the self is just saying yes to all of it completely. It's up to us in any moment whether we are choosing or including, whether we're excluding or including. It's the only thing we have control of in any moment. You cannot control directly what arises in your body, your mind, your emotions, your world. But as you begin to include all perspectives you have on yourself now, then gradually what arises in the body and mind will begin to reflect that more and more. Peaceful mind and body comes from a peaceful attitude. It reflects. So, a very simple shift in the way that you handle these things when they arise. No awakened being has ever succeeded in getting rid of their ego at all. They've just included until it's a habit. And then eventually it's barely recognizable what's coming up in the mind or the body. And whatever comes up in the mind and body, it's welcomed and accepted, because there's no need to reject it when you know it cannot make you lose your peace, your joy, your bliss, your silence, your stillness. The only reason we ever seem to lose it is because we believe that that is possible. Can you lose your peace if you are the source of peace? Can you lose the self if you are it? Only if you feel that you are still trying to get to it or trying to stay as it will you lose it. This is fundamental. If you really get this one thing, it will change your entire existence, For this very moment forward, you can step throughout the rest of your life knowing that no matter what happens in your mind and body and your emotions in your world, whether it's good, bad, or downright ugly, then there is no need to lose anything. You can only lose something if it's not you. You can only lose something if it is other than you. You can only lose peace if you gained it. But if you are it, it's a different story, isn't it? So I hope that answers the question. It's a beautiful question because it really illustrates the core of what I wanted to say today. And hopefully brings you to seeing that just how simple awakening can be in that it's not something we're going to achieve in the future. It is an attitude that we're going to adopt more and more in this present moment. I'm going to spend more and more of my waking state being inclusive. I'm going to work on that. I'm going to pay more attention to when I'm trying to exclude something and shift my attitude. And that's something you always have control over. Okay, so if there are any questions or if anybody would like to ask anything or share anything, I would like to invite you to raise your hand. I think there has been an update to Zoom where it's easier to see, rather than it being buried in the participants section. Some versions of Zoom have the raise hand function now, so just on the bottom. So if you want to ask a question or share some insights, or if what I've said today helps you, or you're struggling in any area with your awakening at all, feel free to raise your hand. Okay, we'll start with Ellen. Whenever you're ready, Ellen.
Okay. Helen, thank you. This was so, can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Good. This was really resonated with me and just really described, what my experience is. And working on, looking at the self as being more inclusive. And what you said really, one thing you really struck, which this is really like what goes through my mind, is like when you're in that peaceful moment and then you just think, oh, this is who I really am and how could I ever believe that, et cetera, et cetera. But what I really find then is when I go back, the fact that I thought that, seems to, it just seems to, just kind of reinforce, that, I really don't know what I'm doing, or, that, that is a mistake. And when my mind is saying that, is that the ego saying that? Is the ego evaluating? I mean, it seems as if the ego is always kind of evaluating what's going on. I just wonder if you have any thoughts on that, or, and then the other thing is, too, sometimes when the emotion is strong, I could use some help with how do I remember that I can, ask to, to see it differently, or that I am whole. Those I think are two challenges that I'm experiencing. So anything you have to offer on that, I would appreciate. Thank you.
It is, the ego is kind of assessing, isn't it? It's always trying to look for some sign that it's got there, that it's arrived, that it's, so it will, it's kind of a mechanism to form a conclusion. So it will experience peace and it'll say, this is it now. This is it, this is the self. And then it will experience disturbance and it'll say, this is not it. Definitely not it. I'm really not there yet. And if you can notice there's that mechanism going on, something is watching both of those, sort of expansiveness and the contracted and the swinging back and forth. And there's something about you that doesn't want to form a conclusion. That's just kind of accepting what is, whether what is feels good in the body, feels expansive and peaceful, or whether it feels contracted and limited and restrictive and just icky, you know, that kind of. And it isn't either of those, and yet it's inclusive of both of them, isn't it? It's inclusive of both ways you can experience yourself. You can experience yourself as a small, limited, finite being that was born and is going to die, or you can experience yourself as infinite peace and love and joy. And the self is really that which doesn't really want to say which one of those is better. Ego would say, well, of course this one is better because it feels so much nicer. But it's just a little flip, a little 180 on that. Well, it feels better because I'm not rejecting anything when I'm experiencing that. I'm naturally aligning, you know, I'm not going to reject peace, but I also don't have to reject this contracted state when it occurs. And the way to kind of remember that is, for me, it was practicing it in those quieter moments, practicing being more open, checking and seeing when I could remember, you know, not in the noise of the worst moment at first, because you're going to set yourself up to fail there, aren't you? You know, I felt this horrible despair and blackness, and I couldn't remember then to stay open. Therefore, I'm a failure, you know. But if those quieter times at first, am I open right now? Am I including? Am I, however good I feel in any moment is evidence of how much I'm including. So you can kind of, I used to write myself notes. I'd stick a little thing on my phone. I'd put something by my bed, you know, all the places where even in the fridge, which was a place where I used to feel quite bad when I go there. So wherever you can help yourself to remember, you know, does that help? It just to kind of recognize it's just a habit we're forming here to be more inclusive, isn't it?
Yes, yes. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Good. It's really, really common and really it's normal to experience this kind of back and forth and to feel these extremes of I'm making so much progress and then, oh my gosh, I don't think I've made any progress. I'm right back where I started. Yeah, wonderful.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Okay, would anyone else like to ask a question? Okay, Bev, whenever you're ready.
This is very helpful for me because I was feeling this with my daughter. She knows exactly where my buttons are.
They have a wonderful way of finding those, don't they, children? They just kind of know, they're born knowing how to push buttons.
Oh my God, like I'm unrecognizable. I'm like, where am I going? So I what I started experiencing is immediately after, it was like I could feel all of this energy behind the anger.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if that's what you're talking about, but it was almost like it was a big energy. And I don't know if it was because I was so maybe explosive in another way, but I felt just this calm, like the energy turned into like this calm. And then I was just wondering how to do that beforehand, and you're kind of explaining that now, to really include while it's happening versus after it happened.
Yeah.
So I think that might be the difference, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, if you can really remind yourself in between those moments, as you were saying with Ellen, that I'm not suffering because of this anger although that's what my ego is sure of. And my ego is sure that when the button gets pushed and this anger surges, that's why I'm suffering. But in reality, why I'm suffering is because I'm trying to push against what is, trying to push against that anger. And that anger is what is in this moment. You know, so the suffering is always optional. The anger, we might not be able to control in any moment, and we don't need to. It will just be felt and dissipate. So I can remind myself of the real cause, the real reason I'm suffering, which is I've got this idea, I need to get rid of this thing that's happening before I can get back to peace. The more I work on remembering that during the calmer moments, the more I'll be able to remember that when something really, you know, gets triggered inside, when that button gets pushed. Because this kind of surge of energy behind the anger is really this kind of movement to try to get rid of it. All the meanings that this, okay, now because I'm experiencing this feeling, I'm going to lose my peace, you know. And so there's a massive surge to push against it, isn't there? Which, when you really remind yourself, it's not, the anger isn't why I'm suffering. You know, I can feel anger and peace if I'm not pushing against the anger. There'll be a strong peace in which the anger is just occurring, and I won't really feel the urge to do anything about it. If I can remind myself in those moments in between, you know, the real cause of the suffering, then it'll be easier to remember in those other moments.
Okay. Thank you.
Good questions. Very, very good. Would anyone else like to ask or share anything? Okay, Ron?
So in essence, Helen, I guess you're saying it's okay to be angry.
Yes. Yeah. And we only don't want to be angry because we feel we've lost something when it comes. You know, and there's this huge, you get me going on another rant here, but there's this huge stereotype, isn't there, of awakened beings that they don't feel any negative emotion at all. They've somehow gotten rid of all of it and only experience peace. And that's how we end up. But we get to that by including peace and anger. You know, for quite some time after you've seen what you really are, there's going to be these old reactions coming up, these old ways of seeing things coming up, and there's nothing we can do about that. So yeah, it's okay to be angry, especially if you feel it doesn't need to make me lose my equanimity at the same time. It's just another way you're experiencing yourself in that moment. It doesn't mean anything in that way, does it?
Thank you.
Very good, lovely. Okay. Anybody else like to ask? Okay, Ian or Maggie, whichever.
It's in relation to, funnily enough, what you're discussing today. I've had a strange thing going on about 48 hours in that it feels like mind is looking for an issue, and there's a situation gone on with a family member who had an upsetting experience over Christmas, and mind is really completely projecting what that person thinks about me. She loves me. And there's all these thoughts. I was awake in the night and I can look at it and I can, you know, see that, but it just keeps coming back up and back up and back up. Just wonder what's going on, really, because none of it is being spoken by this person. It is literally all going on in my head, and I recognize it's an insecurity. Thoughts, please.
What meaning does it have for you that this is still going on? You know, some things, wheels are still turning, something's trying to make something out of nothing inside. You know, mind's doing what it does best, you know, trying to conclude something, find this conclusion. And so really what it will go on for as long as it has some meaning for you. And that meaning can be very subtle, such as this shouldn't be happening by now, or this isn't what awakened beings experience, or my mind should be quiet, or this means there's something else wrong, you know, I'm not there yet. You know, there might be some very subtle meanings given to it inside. What if for the rest of your life and beyond, physical life and beyond, every now and again mind may try to make something out of nothing?
Yeah, which it does. This one just is, every time I look at it and obviously see that it isn't true, it just bounces back up straight away. So yeah, there's I'll look at the feeling behind it and the reason.
What's the idea that comes up when it bounces back up? Why hasn't this gone? This should have gone because, you know, or the fact that it's here means, the fact that it's happening means, you know, so you can kind of, if it was gone, what would you feel differently? If it never happened again, would you feel more awake than you are now? You know, is there some meaning given to it? Whatever the subtle meaning is, an expectation it should stop, because when it stops, ... you know, I will be something like that going on inside.
I've some contemplation on that, because there's nothing specific. You know, like sometimes you'll say something, I'll go, oh, what's that? None of them have ticked. So I'll ask and look into that. That's helpful, actually. Thank you.
Just to see if this stopped happening, would I think I feel differently, you know? And if this continues to happen, how will I think and feel about it? What will it mean to me?
Yeah, it's
very subtle meanings at the end, aren't they?
Yes, very, very subtle.
Yeah.
Trying to pick a fight with someone in my head that isn't really fighting with me, and I hate it when we fight anyway. I always have. So it's so ridiculous.
It's usually, you can just notice that the separate sense of self is scrabbling to try to find something that's wrong. You know,
Definitely feels like that. Definitely feels like it's.
In the end, it doesn't even need to include anyone external in it. It's literally just going on inside.
It's just hit me. The answer is that still seeing separate beings, and shouldn't, but if I'm seeing separateness, then
I shouldn't be doing that or something. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Helen. Thank you.
Can I just ask a?
Yeah, sure.
What you've spoken about this morning reminds me a bit of some of the work you've set on the graduate program about cause and effect. So it's really kind of, if you think you were going to lose that sense of peace as a result of somebody taking some sort of action, you're really going back to like cause and effect of two, aren't you?
If I believe there's two, I'll experience two. Ego says, well, I believe there's two because I'm experiencing two.
Yeah.
But, you know, you can see, okay, if I believe there's self and ego, then I'll experience them as separate, oscillating things. If the self can appear as either a limited finite being or an infinite unlimited being, and it's the same one, just experienced two different ways, then my experience is going to become more and more stable in just that, which doesn't really have a problem. So the cause, it's exactly cause and effect. Yeah. If I still feel that they are two, I'll be trying to get rid of one of them and keep one of them. Yeah. The very idea that they are two is what's causing me to experience this effect of being divided into two.
Yeah. So when you're on like a smooth path for a while, there's still a natural tendency to kind of, well, I must keep doing what I'm doing. Otherwise, I will veer off this nice smooth path and go on the rookie path again.
Which is why we have to go through this oscillation, because in those quiet moments where I'm just accidentally slid into peace, it may not occur to me that when I'm feeling peace, I'm not dividing myself artificially into two. Only when I keep experiencing two will it occur to me what's going on here? Why? You know, otherwise we don't really learn in that we keep reaching for those expansive, beautiful moments and pushing against the other seeming opposite. And they seem like opposite, they seem like two. They really do. They seem about as opposite as you could get of any set of opposites. As opposite as hot and cold, don't they? Peace, love and joy and bliss and everything's right with the world and oh my God, I'm a failure, I'm never gonna get this, why can't I? How did I ever experience peace? It seems so far away, all of that. But they're not two. And such is your power as the self, that if I believe they're two, boy, will I experience two. That's the essence and the root of duality, is my belief that they're two.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Okay, thanks, Helen. That helps. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Last but not least, we'll go with Steve.
Morning.
Morning, how you doing?
Not too bad, how are you?
Good, good.
I've been sat here for ages trying to formulate a question. And Ian started and just threw me. So what comes out now, I don't know. Over Christmas time, I've been a bit low, should I say, and as things have started getting back to normal. Obviously, I'm feeling a little bit better. I can go out, I can see people, I can do what I need to do. But I came out of it with, although I tried to accept the low mood. I tried to use all the tools you've given us, yeah. And I'm not doing a very good job at it. I feel like at times, you know, I'm not doing very well. But I've come out with it. It's so much really annoying me. It didn't come from me, it's a teaching, but it's, you know, it's something you've talked about, I think. Who's it affecting? Who's it affecting here? You know what I mean? And it's affecting me, who is me, and I follow that in. And it brings me back to all right, feeling okay, you know, peaceful again. What you've just been talking about now seems slightly different. Although I could ask a question then, can I accept this? Can, you know, I don't know. Is it different? That's what I'm trying to get at. Is it different? I would say something different here, because I find it difficult to keep up what's going on. You know, I mean, I know it's all the same teaching, but it's different each week. And I'm trying to get out of one and, oh, that's working, stay with that for a while. And then you change.
I am a one-trick pony, really. I've only got one thing I'm saying all the time, just trying to dress it up different ways to try to get through the beliefs that we have, like I needed to. So if there's a particular way that anybody has said something that really impacts you, I would say stay with that. In the essence of what I'm saying this morning is really the same as you said, that something happens and there'll be a version of me that appears in that moment that really is upset by this or affected by this. And then just, can I gently urge myself to remember more and more that there's also a version of me available in this moment that's not affected by this or upset by this, you know. So that asking who is affected by this starts from noticing there's a sense of, I am affected by this, I really am, you know, feeling this. And then that inquiry can take us deeper into that version of ourselves that isn't troubled or affected at all. And I can just accept more and more those versions of myself, that neither one of them is better or worse, and that I can be experiencing both of them. There can be this reaction going on inside, and there can be this place in me that just is allowing that, accepting that. You know, so sometimes the inquiry will just take you into that greater version of yourself, more expansive version of yourself, where you can just let whatever's playing play. So it's the same thing, really. What you're saying, you know, is true, that is right, that I am saying the exact same thing, just kind of coming at it from a different angle, really. If you just don't form any conclusion that the ego should never arise again, because, you know, it's going to happen, isn't it? At some point, something will trigger something.
Yeah, but it's in a reaction that I'm sort of, I don't particularly like this. So I'm going to go to this. Am I not rejecting it by doing that?
You can notice an egoic response arising. Let's say some fear arises or something. You can notice that, but prefer to identify as the peace, as that which is accepting. You can identify as that which is open and accepting without trying to get rid of the other thing, can't you?
Well, yeah.
Like a stepping back almost, or stepping outwards, or zooming out.
Okay.
You think?
I'll think about it. No, don't think too much about it. I think I know what you're saying. I also listen to it again.
Wherever we suffer is where we're not open to experience all the ways in that moment.
That's what I'm saying, though.
Yeah.
Sorry. But when I go back into silence, I've stopped experiencing that.
Yeah.
So I'm not.
You don't stop experiencing the egoic sense of self in the silence because you're pushing against it.
Right. Okay.
Can you see the difference, right? Ego says, when I stop reacting like this, then I'll get back to peace. But then we inquire, and it takes us into this greater space of our being, the silence, and noticing that silence. It's not trying to get rid of anything. We naturally kind of stop resisting this other thing, so it disappears.
It dissolves, doesn't it? It dissolves that. It's like...
So the way that you did that was just stopping pushing against by noticing the silence instead. You know.
And that's good.
Silence doesn't say silence or disturbance. It says, you know, how it is right now is fine, isn't it? Completely. So if you notice why the inquiry works, why the other reaction disappears, is because you stop pushing against or trying to choose, don't you, in that moment without realizing. You're feeling some strong response inside, some and then you kind of inquire, well, what is this really? And you start to experience this kind of silent space. Naturally, when you notice the silent space, you can't really be pushing against anything at the same time. We're not conscious of that. So we think that the reaction has disappeared in place of the silence, but the reaction has disappeared because the silence isn't pushing against anything.
That's pretty clear, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Lovely. Very good. All these questions have been the same thing today, haven't they? Really, just kind of verbalized a different way. And yours is no exception to that. I might not have been conscious of why I stopped suffering. And it's really always because I'm not pushing against anything in that moment. And my attention goes to the silence, the stillness, the peace. Then I'll stop suffering because it's not able to reject anything.
Yeah, there's a difference between trying to get away from suffering and trying to get to peace. You just somehow in the middle, you just try.
You're in the middle. Your silence isn't demanding you get rid of anything. It's like a middle path, isn't it? Only ego is trying to get rid of ego to get back to silence. Silence really doesn't care whether ego's talking or not. And therefore it kind of melts away anyway, because it's saying, fine, fine, you know. So.
Good stuff. Thank you.
Okay, good. Just lovely. Thank you, Steve. Okay, so we will leave it there for today. Thank you very much for joining me. Namaste.